This is going to be a long one, and it will have a lot of backstory, so bear with me here. My wife and I have been married for 8 months and have been living with my parents while attending graduate school. Before getting married, my parents helped a ton with our wedding and offered us the chance to stay with them as long as we needed, rent-free, to save up as much money as possible and buy a house. We live in a very high cost of living major city, and houses are priced over $1 million. However, living at home after marriage has not been easy due to several dynamics. My mom and wife have had a very hot and cold relationship since they met. Since she moved in, my mom has been highly critical of my wife, both privately to me and in front of my wife. She has criticized her cleaning ability, her family's, my in-laws, cleanliness, her willingness to work hard, her commitment to family values, more on that later, her personal hygiene, and her treatment of me. And this is all that comes to mind in the moment, and I'm sure I am missing a lot. Mom believes my wife has changed me and made me less involved with my family and turned me into an unclean person. She called my wife a filthy animal because of her disagreement with how my wife takes care of herself, as it relates to her shower routine and how she maintains our room. My parents have always been clean freaks, and while I would consider myself a clean person, I'm not as obsessive about it as them. As alluded to, Mom comes into our room and reorganizes stuff. When we expressed a desire for privacy, I know it's their house. But as a new couple, come on. She also has this fixation on rules, and my wife doing things exactly the way my family does, with cleaning and maintaining the house, amongst other things. To put it simply, my family and my wife's family do things very differently. Now, to be very clear, I have stood up for my wife and have sternly denounced any commentary about her, but this has not dissuaded my mom. My mom and wife also have different overall worldviews. Mom is radically enmeshed with her family, parents/siblings, and if anyone remotely criticizes them or their ways, she explodes and says something along the lines of, "How dare you, they did so much for you." It is basically guilt-tripping one into thinking they are indebted to her family. Yes, I will admit my grandparents, aunts, and uncles have done a lot for me, but to leverage this to control one's actions feels wrong. She was sheltered by her parents and has the exact same mentality and worldview they do. They come from a rural village and did not achieve higher levels of education, so possibly lack critical thinking ability. All she knows is family. My wife, on the other hand, is a very simple soul and had a simple upbringing. She can be temperamental and confrontational, which at times has exacerbated issues between them. But she does not want to cause problems. Like me, she just wants to have peace and a good marriage, with the same autonomy that an average couple would enjoy. My wife and I are very religious, and because of our views, we could not attend a family member of a different faith's function early on in our marriage. My mom threw a fit for a good few weeks, saying that I was selfish, losing my family values, and insulting other religions. This family member attended my wedding, and I care for them very much, and I have no qualms about their beliefs. But I stood my ground and said, "You are telling me to respect other beliefs, but you are not respecting mine." I was very respectful, while insults were levied at me left, right, and center. From this, other issues built up, and things reached a point where my wife and I had to stay at her parents' place for 2 weeks in December. Things improved gradually when we got back, and there were smaller hiccups here and there, but nothing major. This was until about a month ago when I used some of my savings, money we got from our wedding gifts, to pay for some courses and counseling. I transferred the money from my savings account, which is joint with my wife, to my checking account, which my mom is my guarantor on, and I am the same for hers, to pay my credit card off. She flipped out because I had initially agreed to use the money for a down payment on a property. While that was still the plan, I don't want to accrue interest on my credit card, and I'd rather borrow from myself than pay interest, and refill my savings later on. I was called selfish for seeking out counseling for the previous issues, and this turned into a big fiasco. Mom insisted on seeing the bank statements, but I told her no, it's not her concern. But she leveraged my grandparents again and said they were hurt by my behavior, and that I broke their trust. This did not bother me, as I knew it was empty threats. However, I had no choice but to show her. Because of relentless pressure and it affecting my wife's academics, she ended up failing her midterm because of all the stress my mom put on us. From there, things got better again. But the lingering fear of another outburst has been in the back of my head and my wife's. The comfort of home and sense of security has all but disappeared. This was the third outburst my mom had. Now I have not mentioned my dad, and he has his share of issues too. He initially was on my side throughout all these issues, but when faced with my mom, he switched up on me and levied insults about my wife and me. He told me that we got married too soon, he got married at the same age I did, we're immature, that we did not contribute around the house, which is false. We contribute to the cooking and cleaning as much as everyone else. But due to us being the new couple, there seems to be an expectation that we do more, despite being in grad school. That she was spoiled, lazy, and not prepared for marriage. He also told me that I was abandoning my mother in favor of my wife. Whenever my wife cooks, she usually cooks for the whole family. But sometimes for just me and her, she cleans up after herself. But he goes back and cleans up again when there is negligible to no mess. And he in turn points out the small things that were missed. He does the same when she cleans the bathroom or sweeps the floors, but when my sister or I do those things, he leaves it be. He also always hovers over my wife when she is cooking, telling her to place dishes in a certain place, or other small technicalities when he himself does not cook at all. Being in school, we also tend to sleep late some nights, and in turn, sleep in the next day. We sleep the same 6-9 hours as everyone else, and in turn, get called lazy. This is largely due to us having to contribute around the house on my parents' schedules and put aside our own work. We cannot do any focused work in the earlier parts of the day, and it tends to get left to the later parts of the day, after housework, and any preventive maintenance work is done. By the time we are done working and spending some time with one another, as is the norm for new couples, we finally go to bed around 2 to 3 a.m. most nights. Now, despite all of the above, besides tempers flaring a few times on our end, my wife and I have stood up for ourselves while trying to be respectful, despite being insulted at every turn. I have been told I am selfish, lacking family values, and that I am a disgrace, never once stepped out of line growing up, and have always been well-behaved and good in school. So after all the issues, my wife and I decided to look for our own place, without telling mine or her parents. We found a place and signed a lease. My father-in-law owns a business and co-signed with us, so we told him first. We then told my mother-in-law and SILs, because we were staying over this past weekend when we got approved and signed the lease. Now, the hurdle is breaking it to my family. I told my sister first thing when I got home, and told my dad the next day. My sister told me it was a mistake not telling my parents I was looking for a place. But if I did, they would have tried to veto my efforts relentlessly, due to a deeply held belief her and my grandparents hold, that renting is throwing your money away, as well as a superiority complex with home ownership. My mom literally told me, "Do you want to rent a ghetto apartment like..." She stopped herself, but was going to say my wife's uncles, who rent and are happy doing so. I told my dad, and he had mixed emotions, as he thought I was going to stay for 2-3 years as initially planned. But given the situation, I want to preserve the integrity of my family ties and believe that it is best for everyone if my wife and I move out. I also want autonomy, as my family is very controlling and expects us to do things the way they did. Now, Dad said it was an eventuality, but said he felt betrayed and deceived by me not consulting him and my mom. He also said he was confused and did not know how to feel, and I could see he was holding back tears when I told him. He said it was a slap in the face, and it showed I thought very little of my relationship with my parents. Also said that it was embarrassing for him and my mom because we were moving out, as it would signal to the rest of the family and my in-laws that there were problems. Now, I have not told my mom yet, because she will go nuclear and throw a huge fit, as she did when I previously did things my own way. Nor have I told my grandparents, who I argued with previously about this subject. They all want me to buy a house or condo, which will cost me $10K or so monthly after all expenses. Whereas if I rent, I can keep my and my wife's expenses under $3,500. The purpose of my post is to ask, how should I approach the situation now, in terms of telling my mom and grandparents? I also want to know if I was wrong in any way possible. I talked to 2 different therapists, one in my culture, religion, and another who was secular, and they both told me to move out ASAP. I want to know if I was justified in doing what I did without consulting my parents, and if there was any potential strain or ending of ties, if it would have been my fault. Thanks for reading my long post, and I appreciate any help. Edit 1. I don't know if this was clear, but the move-in date for our new place is May 1st. Still gives us 2-ish weeks at my parents' place. I will provide updates as things progress. Thank you all for your support. I truly feel vindicated. Update: I was out with my dad to go to weekly worship, and he began chastising me and my wife for the decision. I stood my ground and basically said, we are leaving because of the types and frequency of problems living together has caused, and that if we are to have any relationship, then we need distance. He said it was disgraceful of me to not consult them, to which I replied, if I consulted you, there would be more issues, and you would attempt to veto my decision. He said I am throwing everything they taught me out the window, and that all their work raising me now means nothing. I pointed out that while we are thankful for the favor they did by letting us stay, it seems that all help has strings attached, and that this controlling behavior is why we need to leave. He said there wouldn't be a problem if you adhered to the agreement and stayed for 2-3 years, but I'm like, the situation has changed and is no longer tenable for us. Another qualm of his was that my wife influenced me, to which I replied it was a decision we made purely for our well-being and something we need. He had no desire to listen to my perspective and just wanted it to berate me. As he said exactly, I don't care what your intentions are. This is what it is. This is exactly why I am moving out, to break this cycle of control. I am going to tell my mom in about 45 minutes. Wish me luck. I know people said don't tell her, but cultural ramifications run deep here, so I will have to tell her. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You have overbearing, controlling, passive-aggressive parents, OP, particularly your mom. They are going to end your marriage if you stay any longer. Time to cut the apron strings, or they will suffocate you into compliance. Make sure your mom doesn't have any more access to your money. Ignore her bullying about this, and move any valuable items or documents to a safe place. Godspeed, son. Edited to confirm, I want to know if I was justified in doing what I did without consulting my parents, and if there was any potential strain or ending of ties, if it would have been my fault. Answer is, yes, you are justified. Yes, they will blame you, but it is not your fault. Comment 2. Good heavens, your post reads like you have Stockholm Syndrome. Your parents were like kidnappers who wanted to control your every move. For the sake of your marriage, you are doing the right thing. You need to be on your own and to do your best to not need help from your family. I would immediately open a new bank account for you and your wife only. You should not share a main account with your mother. I will, just as you supported your wife, your dad supported your mom. Everyone gave this a good try, but it doesn't work. You and your wife need to feel safe and comfortable in your space. Now, for the update. Thanks for sticking with me on this. So, I told my mom. It went about as well as you'd expect, which is to say, not well at all. She cried, yelled, and said I was betraying the family. She even threw in that I was ruining her reputation. I tried to explain, but she wasn't having any of it. She said I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I left the room feeling like maybe she was right, but deep down, I knew we had to get out. A week later, my mom did something that shocked us all. She sold a piece of jewelry that had been in the family for generations and handed me the money. Said it was for the down payment on a house, her way of keeping us close. I was torn. It felt wrong to take it, but she insisted. My wife was against it, but I thought it could mend fences, so I took it. That was the choice that started the unraveling. We moved into our new place, and things were quiet for a bit. Too quiet. My parents stopped calling. My sister said they felt abandoned. I tried reaching out, but my calls went unanswered, and it was like we didn't exist to them anymore. My wife said we were better off, but I couldn't shake the guilt. Then the bomb dropped. My dad had a heart attack. He survived, thank God, but the guilt crushed me. I rushed to the hospital, and my mom blamed me, said the stress I caused did this. I stayed by his side trying to make amends, but the damage was done. In the midst of this, my wife found out she was pregnant. Joy mixed with pain. We wanted to share the news, hoping it would bring the family back together, but my mom's reaction was cold. She said the child would grow up not knowing its grandparents because of me. The money from the jewelry turned out to be cursed. My mom demanded it back, saying it was meant for a house, not for rent. I refused, and that's when she revealed the truth. The jewelry was collateral for a loan my grandparents had taken out years ago. They were now facing legal action because of my decision to use the money elsewhere. I was stuck. If I returned the money, my wife and I would struggle with the rent and the baby on the way. If I didn't, my grandparents could lose everything. I chose to keep the money, thinking I could somehow fix it later. But deep down, I knew this was a mistake that would haunt me. The aftermath was a family torn apart. My wife and I were isolated, my parents were drowning in resentment and health issues, and my grandparents were facing financial ruin. And through it all, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was to blame for trying to take the easy way out. Thanks for reading through this mess. My husband gets too close to a coworker, and when she confesses her love, he rejects her, but she gets him fired. So I take her to court and win every last dime. Context. My husband and I have been together for 5 years, and I consider us mature and responsible adults. There was never any insecurity, and we have had a mutual understanding of boundaries when it comes to friendship with the opposite gender. Our relationship was, up till now, loving and supportive. What happened? I recently became aware that my husband has grown quite close to his female colleague, married at work. Initially, they would mingle and gossip in groups and never alone, or at least that's what I observe and hear from my husband. In the last few months, they began to have more calls, all related to work gossip, and he took those calls in front of me sometimes, and one-to-one meetings. They also began texting a lot, but that didn't raise any flags to me at that time. 2 months ago, my husband started picking up tennis, and I presumed it was just another hobby. He began joining that female colleague and her husband for tennis sessions after work and on weekends. I thought nothing of it as we both have respected each other's personal time, and it wasn't just the two of them. And then the time comes to 2 weeks ago, when they went on a business trip together. It wasn't until I saw some photos of them together that my alarm bells started going off. They were sitting arm to arm, touching, or leaning against one another in several photos, albeit in a group setting. After seeing the photos, I asked to see my husband's texts with this female colleague. I'm not sure what I should be looking for, but it's an unsettling feeling I can't shake. Their messages were neither flirty nor inappropriate. Most were related to work or work gossips. But then, there were instances where their exchange became personal, like sharing what she ate, how her commute was, and other bits and pieces of life. Later, through talking to my husband, he admitted that the female colleague had also picked up tennis around the same time as he did, though he insists it was not intentional. At this point, I sense that there is something between them, no matter how insignificant, and told my husband he needed to stop contacting this colleague outside of work or for any non-work matters. It was an ultimatum. Either he proves that he can do that or we separate. He initially denied any wrongdoing and said that I was imagining things. I told him I was only trying to prevent any possibility of an affair. To me, affairs don't appear out of thin air or for no reason. It usually starts with regular contact, which then becomes a habit. Then, it grows into a sense of familiarity and comfort, which pushes the relationship to be more than friends. I'm just not willing to take any risks because I really do love him. My husband heard me and understood where I'm coming from. He said he respects my boundaries and is willing to cut off from that colleague. He texted the colleague politely that he would limit contact with her to work and hopes she understands. What really threw me off was the response from the colleague. She responded that he was absurd and she did not appreciate being dragged into our relationship problems. She sounded extremely upset and told my partner it was not even her idea to play tennis in the first place. And then she informed their manager about this, and apparently everyone on their team knows now. Now I am feeling really confused. On one hand, I thought what I'm doing is good for my relationship, but on the other, I'm not sure if I overreacted and made a mountain out of a molehill. This is the first time I'm caught in such a situation, so I could really use some advice. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. He should have just severed contact with her without being too direct, meaning actually limiting communication. There was no need to come and say, "Hey, let's stop." Because on her end, if she was innocent with no ill intentions, you guys made her look like some thirsty woman who's after this guy, who needs to be told to back off, as if she was making moves. Don't get me wrong, I'm with you. He should have cut contact, just he should have gone about it differently. So her being defensive is just saying, "Hey, I wasn't flirting with you, this wasn't my idea, so don't make it seem like I'm the one pursuing you." Comment 2. I think the ultimatum bit was harsh, but I think you were absolutely correct to tell your husband that his relationship with his coworker was skirting into the danger zone. I think that your husband could have taken a step back without texting the coworker because he could have managed what was going on without explicitly saying anything to OP. His relationship with her wasn't out of bounds. It was just getting too close. He could have shut that down on his own. Now, for the update. Thanks for sticking around. Here's what's been going down. So, after that whole mess with my husband and his colleague, things got even more complicated. The colleague's husband got wind of the situation, and guess what? He wasn't happy. He came storming over to our house one evening, red-faced and fuming, demanding to speak with my husband. They had a heated argument right there on our front lawn, and the whole neighborhood was watching. It was mortifying. Turns out the colleague's husband had his own suspicions about their so-called tennis sessions, and my husband's ultimatum just added fuel to the fire. He accused them of having an affair, which both of them denied, but the damage was done. The colleague's marriage was on the rocks, and somehow I felt responsible for it. In the aftermath, my husband's work environment turned icy. His manager pulled him aside and gave him a stern talk about professionalism and personal boundaries. The colleague was transferred to another department, and my husband was left feeling like the villain at his job. He was upset, saying that he was just trying to do the right thing by our marriage, and now he was being punished for it. But that wasn't the end of it. A week later, my husband's phone buzzed with a message that would turn our world upside down. It was from the colleague, and she was apologizing. She confessed that she had developed feelings for my husband, and that she was planning to leave her husband. She said she never meant for things to get this far, but she couldn't help how she felt. My husband showed me the message, and I could see the confusion in his eyes. He told me he didn't feel the same way, that he loved me, and that was that. He replied to her, making his feelings clear, and asked her to respect our marriage. I wanted to believe him, but a part of me wondered if he was just saying what I wanted to hear. The next day, my husband was called into a meeting with HR. The colleague had filed a complaint against him, claiming that he led her on and then abruptly cut her off, causing her emotional distress. It was her word against his, and with the recent drama, it didn't look good for him. The company was taking the complaint seriously, and there was talk of suspension or even termination. I was furious. How could she twist the situation like that? My husband was trying to salvage our marriage, and now his career was at stake. It felt like no matter what we did, we were in the wrong. The tension at home was unbearable. My husband was stressed about work, and I was constantly worried that he wasn't telling me the whole truth. We were walking on eggshells around each other, and I missed the days when our relationship was simple and loving. Then, the final blow came. My husband was let go from his job. They said it was due to restructuring, but we both knew the real reason. He was devastated, and I was too. Our financial security was gone, just like that. And now, here we are, 2 weeks later. My husband is job hunting, but it's tough out there. The colleague and her husband are getting a divorce, and I can't help but feel like we're partly to blame. Our marriage is strained, and I'm trying to hold on to the trust we once had. I keep telling myself that we'll get through this, that our love is strong enough to survive any storm. But deep down, I'm scared. Scared that this is just the beginning of more troubles to come. I've accepted the situation as it is, but I can't shake the feeling that things will never be the same again. Thanks for hearing me out. My wife cheats with a coworker and plays me for a fool. So I expose their affair to the entire company and watch their careers crumble. My wife and I are only married a few short years, and she cheated on me with a coworker. I have been faithful the entire time we have been together, from meeting till today. She was unhappy with her job and needed a change. She found a job with a previous coworker of many years, who we both knew well. She had worked with him for many years with no attraction, and didn't give me any need to worry. I also knew him well, and I never thought that anything could happen. Long story short, the new job was a nightmare and made her more miserable, to the point she was very unhappy and became very short and nasty with me. All I did was try and help and understand so I could be there for her, but she said I was smothering her. After 6 months of misery, things got worse, and I noticed she turned off her Snap notifications and location, amongst other things. I asked her if there was someone else, and she said no, but that she was unhappy at work, and I needed to understand she was having a hard time. I needed to back off. I continued to try and help the situation and give space with no success. After multiple times of weird feelings and concerns, I followed her to work, and she met the coworker in a park. They got in the back of her car and had intimacy. I didn't know how to handle it and took some time to think. I didn't confront her due to a special day with our kids. A few days later, I followed her again and the same thing happened. This time I walked up and opened the car door. He was on top of her and inside her bear. I stated I knew it was an affair, and there it is, then walked away. Later that day, we sat down to talk, and it was going on for a month, which I could pinpoint exactly. 2 hotel visits and a bunch of car meets. Anyway, we talked about everything, and she told me a bunch of things that were bothering her that she said she couldn't tell me before. She has become much better now that she is finally opening up and communicating, and has taken steps to get away from him, and also using an app so I can see her location at all times. She is also very open now and tells me everything going on in her day. Now the hard part, should I heal and stay? And if so, how do I get past this to do that? I'm really struggling with this, and it even makes me question myself and if I contributed to this by trying to help and becoming too overbearing. To make matters worse, we each have 2 children from previous relationships and are a blended family, all living together full time. The kids love each other and would be devastated if we all had to split. I know that can't be the only reason to stay and work it out, but it complicates things. What should I do? Will she do it again? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the idiot. She is open and communicative. No, she was busted. Open and communicative would have been before she slept with him, not after. You will never measure up to this new guy. She will stay with you out of guilt and convenience, get a divorce. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Comment 2. She was having a hard time all right with his weenie. How can you even look at her after what you saw without total disgust? She's got you blaming yourself for being overbearing. There is no healing from this. Now, for the update. Thanks for sticking around for this update. So the past 2 weeks have been, well, interesting. I thought things were getting better since my wife started being more open, but I was wrong. I caught her lying again. She said she was going to her sister's house, but I had a gut feeling something was off. I checked the location app and she wasn't there. She was at a hotel, the same one from before. I felt like a fool for trusting her again. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I went home and looked after the kids. They could tell something was up, but I just couldn't bring myself to tell them what was happening. The next day, she came home acting like nothing happened. When I finally asked her about it, she broke down and admitted she met him again. She said she felt trapped and didn't know how to end it for good. I was angry, not just at her, but at myself for not seeing the signs. I thought about our kids, how they've become siblings, not just step-siblings. They share friends, schools, and memories. The thought of tearing their world apart was unbearable. But then, my oldest, who's pretty sharp, asked me if everything was okay between me and Mom. Kids sense these things, you know? I didn't want to lie. So I just said we were going through a tough time. He looked at me with those eyes full of worry, and I felt my resolve crumble. I decided to take action. I called her coworker. I told him it had to stop, that he was ruining our family. He didn't say much, just that he was sorry and it wouldn't happen again. I wanted to believe him, but I'd been burned too many times. The following week, I took some time off work to clear my head. I spent time with the kids, took them to their favorite park, and tried to act normal. But inside, I was a mess. I kept thinking about my wife, how we used to be so happy. I remembered our first date, how she laughed at my jokes, and the way she looked at me like I was the only guy in the world. Then, out of the blue, my wife's sister called me. She said she knew about the affair and that she was worried about her sister. She told me about their childhood, how their parents' messy divorce had scarred my wife, how she always feared being abandoned. It didn't excuse her actions, but it made me see her in a different light. I realized that if there was any chance to save our marriage, we needed professional help. So I suggested counseling. My wife agreed, and we had our first session last week. It was tough, opening up about our feelings, but it felt like a step in the right direction. Just when I thought we were making progress, I made a mistake that changed everything. I left my phone unlocked, and my wife saw a text from a female coworker. It was innocent, just work stuff, but it set her off. She accused me of having an affair, of being a hypocrite. It took hours to calm her down and convince her it was nothing. That incident shook me. It showed me how fragile our trust was. But it also made me realize that we both had issues to work through. It wasn't just about her affair. It was about our relationship as a whole. So, we've been going to counseling regularly. It's not easy, but we're both trying. We're learning to communicate better, to be honest with each other. And slowly I can see changes in her. She's more attentive, more caring. She's trying to rebuild what she broke. As for me, I'm learning to let go of my anger. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. I want to forgive her, not just for the kids or the life we built together, but because I still love her. It's going to be a long road, but I'm willing to walk it if it means keeping my family together. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.